Here are 15 players I'm looking to trade for heading into week 7. Starting with Bijan Robinson, who's been kind of disappointing the last 2 weeks. He hasn't been terrible, but he hasn't been an elite running back as far as fantasy goes, and people are starting to get a little nervous about this offense, but he played 77% of the snaps in week 6. That is an elite amount of snaps. He also got 8 targets. He's just an absolute weapon in this passing game, and when you look at him, he is the only running back inside the top 15 of PPR running backs who doesn't have a rushing touchdown. And he's currently the number 8 overall running back. When he starts scoring touchdowns, he's going to go off. Right now, you have an absolute buy low opportunity to go out and get a running back like Bijan Robinson. And I would be more than happy to trade a wide receiver like Puka Nacua, coming off a bit of a down game, who I still do like and think will be good. Package him with a running back like Ramondre Stevenson, who's coming off a very nice game, who I think is a great sell high right now. And I think you could get a running back like Bijan. I also think you could package a wide receiver like Jalen Waddle, also coming off a nice game, and a running back like Zach Moss, who once again outscored Jonathan Taylor and still has a ton of value. Now is the time to trade Zach Moss. Another stud running back who is a great buy low right now was Saquon Barkley. Just came back from injury, didn't do a whole lot in that week 6 Sunday night game, but when you look at his usage, absolutely off the charts. He had 24 carries, he had 5 targets, and he led all running backs in expected fantasy points. Better days are certainly ahead for Saquon Barkley. This guy is still a top 5 running back who you could potentially buy low right now. And I'm going to say maybe a wide receiver like Puka Nacua straight up for Saquon Barkley gets it done. As would a wide receiver like Jalen Waddle straight up for Saquon Barkley get it done. So if you need running back help, you got wide receiver depth, these are a couple of trades you could try. One more high-end running back, Jonathan Taylor. I think this is your last chance to buy low on this guy. The snaps were almost 50-50 here. The touches basically were 50-50 here. But look, JT has been playing more and more since he's come back, and Zach Moss is playing less and less. It's only going to continue in week 7, and I think this is the week we finally see JT 60-70% of the snaps and the clear lead back in this backfield. This is your last chance to go get him. And I think pairing a wide receiver like Mike Evans, who had a bit of a down game in week 6, but has had a nice season, with a running back like Alexander Mattison, who is clearly the guy in Minnesota who people might feel pretty good about, could get it done. And this is a great time to sell high on Adam Thielen. He's being treated like a top 10 rest of the season wide receiver. They're on the bye this week. I think this is a fantastic time to sell high on Adam Thielen and buy low on Jonathan Taylor. Move on to some wide receivers, and I think it's still a great opportunity to buy low on Devonta Smith of the Eagles. He's been really disappointing the last few weeks, but look, he led the team with 11 targets in that game in week 6. He just had some really bad drops, and Jalen Hurts was off, but he's going to get better. The whole offense is going to get better, and he has a great playoff schedule as he gets the Seahawks, the Giants, and the Cardinals to finish the season. So this is a guy who could come on late and help you when it matters most. And I think you could trade a running back like Joe Mixon straight up for Devonta Smith right now. Joe Mixon still has plenty of name value. He's getting touches. He's in that Cincy offense. I think that would get it done. I also think you could trade a running back like Rachaad White, who also gets the volume but not doing a whole lot with it. You pair him with a wide receiver like KJ Osborne, who looks like the number 1 wide receiver in Minnesota right now. You might be able to turn those guys into Devonta Smith. Another wide receiver looks like a great buy low to me right now is DK Metcalf. This was a guy who was drafted 2nd, 3rd round in most leagues, and he's mostly disappointed this year, but there's reasons for optimism. Even here in this week 6 matchup, led the team with 10 targets, and he also has a great playoff schedule as he gets the Eagles, the Titans, and the Steelers to finish the season. And again, I'm going to say a running back like Joe Mixon could probably get you DK Metcalf. As could a running back like Ramondre Stevenson, who I talked about, who I think is a great sell high right now, coming off that nice game. People still want to believe in Ramondre the rest of the season. Go get a wide receiver like DK Metcalf instead. Then after lighting up the early part of the season, Brandon Ayuk has cooled off a bit. Obviously, the entire 49ers offense cooled off, but that was an elite Browns defense. I don't think people realize how good this Browns defense is, but Brandon Ayuk had 10 targets in this game. Deebo Samuel may now miss some weeks. Christian McCaffrey may miss some weeks. There is a huge opportunity here for Brandon Ayuk. And when you look at the 49ers schedule after their week 9 bye, they have one of, if not the softest, wide receiver schedules. And again, I'm going to say a running back like Ramondre Stevenson coming off a nice game, has name value, could get you Brandon Ayuk straight up. As could pairing a running back like Rachaad White, who's still a volume back, and a wide receiver like Jameson Williams, who has a lot of hype behind his name, just caught a long touchdown, but didn't really do much else outside of that. I think pairing those two guys could get you Ayuk right now. Back to running back, and I didn't think Isaiah Pacheco would be a buy low coming out of week 6 against Denver, but he looks like a buy low to me because he's played over 60% of the snaps each of the last 3 games. He's clearly the guy in this backfield, but what I really like is he has had 3 or more targets in all but 2 games this year, which means he gives you a little bit in the passing game. And I talked about Ayuk having quite possibly the best wide receiver schedule rest of the season. Isaiah Pacheco might have the best running back schedule rest of the season. And if you have a wide receiver like DeAndre Hopkins, who's like your wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, and you don't really need him, I think he could get it done straight up for Pacheco. I also think a wide receiver like Chris Godwin, who's had a couple of nice recent games, could also get you Isaiah Pacheco straight up if you need help at running back. We told most people heading into week 6 not to play T. Higgins. We thought he would be a decoy, and sure enough, he was decoy Higgins in week 6. Only played about 50% of the snaps, but that was to be expected coming off of injury. Has had a terrible start to the season, but now they're going on their bye week. He's going to have another week to get healthier, should come out of the bye fully healthy, and this offense is going to be ready to go, and T. Higgins' value has absolutely plummeted. So again, if you have a running back like Ramondre Stevenson finally having a good game, this is a great time to sell high and buy low. And same with a running back like Alexander Mattison. No, he's not putting up huge numbers, but he's getting the volume. He's a clear lead back there. Somebody who needs a running back will certainly give you T. Higgins straight up for Alexander Mattison. Now, I haven't had Jahmyr Gibbs as a buy low in many weeks because, you don't want to buy low on a guy who's not really seeing opportunity, but he may finally get some opportunity because it sounds like David Montgomery is potentially going to miss weeks. The Lions do have a week 9 bye, which means we may not see David Montgomery until week 10. This could mean more opportunity for Jahmyr Gibbs. It could mean not more opportunity, but we know what kind of player he is. We know what kind of upside he has. He's worth the gamble, especially where he's valued right now. I think right now a wide receiver like Courtland Sutton, who has had some nice games this year, could get you Jahmyr Gibbs. I also think a wide receiver like Gabriel Davis, who, coming off a down game in week 6, but put together a nice stretch before that, could also get you Jahmyr Gibbs. His upside is worth the risk when this is all it will take. Amari Cooper was another early round wide receiver that hasn't really returned on investment yet, but man, he has been great this year when you look beyond just fantasy numbers. He looks even better this year than he did last year. We got some encouraging news that the Browns think Deshaun Watson should play in week 7. He's been putting up nice games, even with a bad Deshaun Watson, and even with PJ Walker last week in a tough matchup. And what I really like is he's clearly the number 1 guy here, as he's seen 8 or more targets in all but 2 games this year. And again, I think you could sell high on a running back like Zach Moss, who people still think will be splitting the backfield with Jonathan Taylor, and a wide receiver like KJ Osborne, who people view as the wide receiver 1 in Minnesota. Or again, I'm going to say this is a great opportunity to trade Rachaad White to a team that's desperate at running back. Package him with Courtland Sutton, who has had some nice games. You might be able to get Amari Cooper. And then another wide receiver who hasn't paid off on his ADP, mostly because he's barely played this year, is Christian Watson. But he was this close to a huge week 5 game before the team's bye. Jordan Love just played terrible. Underthrew him, was late on a couple throws. Christian Watson, we know, is the type of guy with massive weekly upside, can win you weeks. This offense will get better, and they get 2 great matchups coming out of the bye with Denver and Minnesota, so it could start right now. And again, I'm going to say a running back like Alexander Mattison might get you Christian Watson straight up, as could a running back like Zach Moss, who again has been good and people think will be splitting with JT rest of the season. And then remember when Drake London was a complete bust of a fantasy pick? Well, those days are long gone. He has been really good. Really since week 1, he's been pretty good. And over the last 2 games, he's been great. He's been a top 20 PPR wide receiver each of the last 2 weeks. But I still feel like people are very nervous about Drake London and are looking for excuses to trade him. This gives you a great buy low opportunity because not only has Drake London been good, but the Falcons are actually throwing it more. They're not a run-heavy team like we expected. There is plenty of opportunity here for Drake London to be great rest of the season. And again, I'm going to say this is a great time to sell high on Ramondre Stevenson if you have the running back depth. Or you could package a running back like Jerome Ford. I know people are worried about Kareem Hunt, but Jerome Ford's still clearly the lead back here, had almost 60% of the rushes. If somebody needs running backs, Jerome Ford looks like a good play, and you could package him with a wide receiver like Michael Thomas, who also still has the name value to help soften the blow for the team that's given up Drake London as a wide receiver. Oh, and do you also remember when Kyle Pitts was a total bust? Yeah, I remember that too, but he's strung together 2 really nice games here. And again, I just talked about it. The Falcons are actually throwing the ball. Ritter's throwing the ball well. He's gone for over 300 yards each of the last 2 games. There is plenty of opportunity for Kyle Pitts, who has been a top 10 tight end each of the last 2 weeks and is currently the tight end 3 in PPR leagues. But people still are terrified of this offense and Kyle Pitts because he burned them so badly last year. I'm going to say if you're deep at wide receiver, you could trade a guy like Terry McLaurin who has name value but hasn't been that good and get Kyle Pitts. Or maybe a running back like Jaylen Warren coming out of the bye, looked good before the bye week, and people still believe he's actually going to become the workhorse running back in Pittsburgh. Speaking of Pittsburgh, you remember Deontay Johnson, their wide receiver one? Well, guess what? He's back, and you should be excited about that because it presents a great buy low opportunity for a wide receiver in PPR leagues. This is a guy who only played 43% of the snaps in that week 1 game before leaving with a hamstring injury. Already had 3 catches for 40 yards and 6 targets on less than half the snaps. In your PPR leagues, he gives you a great floor. So if you need wide receiver help, he's a fantastic target. And again, you might be able to trade a running back like Zach Moss to a running back needy team straight up for Deontay Johnson. And again, maybe a running back like Jaylen Warren, who people really do believe is going to take over this backfield. He could probably get you Deontay Johnson straight up. And then finally, this is a great time to go out and trade for Rashawn Johnson. Didn't play in week 6 dealing with that concussion, but there is a clear path for him here going forward. Khalil Herbert on IR, going to miss at least the next 3 weeks. Like Deontay Foreman was fine. Darrington Evans was okay, but neither of these guys really pulled away. Rashawn Johnson has looked good in his limited opportunities. We could see those opportunities go way up over the next few weeks. This is a guy I already liked to potentially take over this backfield as the season went on. Now he's going to get his chance. And this is your chance to buy low by trading a wide receiver like Michael Thomas, who has name value, for Rashawn Johnson, who has way more upside than Michael Thomas. Or a wide receiver like Josh Reynolds, who's been solid. Maybe somebody is desperate at wide receiver, and they just look at Rashawn Johnson as a handcuff. Josh Reynolds might get it done. So there's 15 players I'm trying to trade for in all my fantasy leagues going into week 7, but you want to know who to pick up off waiver wire, who you should be panicking about, who to start, who to sit, who could boom, everything you need to dominate your week 7 matchup. We got you covered with our week 7 playlist.